of you love those internet polls, top 10 reasons to, right? Because we're going to talk about one of those tonight. 30,000 college graduates were asked, was college worth it? Was it worth the time and the financial investment? Right? That's a big topic that's out there, so you can understand why Gallup would do that poll. And then they followed up with those who said, yes, it's worth it, and they said, why was it worth it? And they came up with a top 10, top 6 list of reasons that college was worth it. So we're going to do a little bit of Family Feud tonight, and we're going to ask these folks to come up with their thought of the reason that Albion College is worth it for them, and we'll see if their 4 answers match any of the 6 from the Gallup poll. So who wants to try to start off here?
I would definitely say that my education at Albion College was completely worth it. To be completely honest, it kept me out of the prison. Literally. I thought that I wanted to be a forensic psychologist and work with the criminally insane in and out of prisons and profile until I came to Albion. And I met one professor, Dr. Jeff Wilson, who showed me what my true passion was, which is learning theory and neuroscience and teaching. And with his mentoring and guidance and friendship, it totally changed the trajectory of my life. So the cost of Albion College is completely worth it.
So I think you put pressure on everyone else because you just got 2 of the 6 in there. One of them was your college experience will be worth it if you find a professor who serves as a mentor. And the other was if you do an extended research project. And I think that Professor Wilson was involved in both of those.
So I would say probably each of us can pick out at least a couple of different mentors from Albion, which, so, kudos to you for going first. I would say that my experience at Albion was very kind of structured in a way that it was structured by other people, but then it was also structured in how I could choose how I wanted to go through Albion. And then I could actually build upon my experience year to year, starting with a study abroad experience in Cameroon, as far as my African experience, and even before then, starting by traveling to France, and then later interning with the U.S. Embassy, and that led to the Fulbright kind of later experiences. So I would say that kind of gridded or kind of building upon experience that you get through either networking or working with other people in Albion is really great for the cost.
I really like that. A coherent education has to be a little different for every student, right? And so if you go on our webpage and look at the billboards coming in, right, there's the billboard that says handcrafted or hands-on education and points right to Albion, but you can have a coherent education that's distinct for every student if it's handcrafted. They didn't think of that on Family Feud, right? So no points for you, right? but it sure makes John Thompson happy because he put together that marketing campaign around hands-on, handcrafted.
So my story about why I believe Albion's worth it, it's really ironic actually. The person that I'm going to tell a story about is in the room. And I'll never forget the day I was interviewing for my position at St. Paul's United Methodist Church, and I walked up to Tom Talbert, and he shook my hands and he said, "Tom Talbert, class of 1982. And it just completely set my mind at ease, and it was almost like a secret Albion handshake. And so it was the networking, the connection, and that continued throughout my entire ministry at St. Paul's. People would come up and they would say, I went to Albion too, and we instantaneously had a shared connection. And I think the other pieces is that I've made lifelong friends here, people who I've retained connections with for over the last decade, and friendships that started in Wesley Hall that have just continued, been fruitful, and been wonderful and life-giving for me all the days since I graduated from Albion College. So I'm eternally grateful for this school.
Doesn't it seem like networking ought to be on the top 6 list? I don't think that enough of those people went to Albion College. They didn't know how important networking was. Thank you.
I think opportunity not just in the classroom, but on the campus. You say, oh, you went to a really small school, but I had real world experience on the campus. And I think I can speak for all of us up here on the panel, whether in the lab in Africa, in the chapel, and for me, in the pages of the Pleiad, in the sports information department. When you apply for that first job or grad school, you're not just a candidate, but you're a sought after candidate.
Right, so internships were on the list, right? So thank you very much. Now, let's move on to another question, and maybe in this one we'll just say, if you've got a really good insight, we'll take one or two answers and we'll move on to other questions. Undergraduates, we have a few in the room here. Imagine that there's a well-planned, systematic journey from start of the first year until you end up in your first job, and then as your career moves along. Talk a little bit about your journey and whether or not it's moved along as you expected, or have there been a few unexpected turns in the road?
Well, since I'm holding the mic, I think that if you were to ask me do you want to be a booker? I would have had no idea what that was if I was at the college, but that's why you have a liberal arts degree and you take science classes and math classes and history classes, is that it makes you think, it fosters a voice, it fosters a different way of doing things, and that's really important. So when these opportunities do come up, that you're ready for them. And that's why I didn't know what my dream job was, but I can say that my dream job found me, and I had my dream job at 27, which is really special, and I'm very thankful for Albion for.
So I would say there are always like highs and lows in the journey. I don't think there ever, and it's kind of weird saying that to a group that's probably mostly older than I am. But I definitely, after graduating from Albion, I went and did a Fulbright, which is a very, by most people, it seems to be quite lauded and it seems to be very exciting. Except for I came home and was jobless for several months and was applying for 40 jobs at the outset and couldn't find exactly what I was going to do because I didn't have a master's degree. I didn't, fit this criteria, fit that criteria, and that sort of thing. And then I found, actually came back to Albion and I was told about this kind of silly little job site that's from University of Michigan. And I found this company that was doing this really great work in India at the time, actually. And they were building medical devices to really help people in different areas. But the title, instead of saying R&D manager, said R&D manger. And so I immediately kind of researched them and sent them kind of an 8 different set of questions and saying, what are you doing, how are you doing these things, and how does this work, and kind of really use that to actually kind of get a cup of coffee with this other young University of Michigan engineer to really start a company.
So you're suggested that there are some bumps along the way, right? And those of us who have gotten to 60 or somewhere along there have discovered that as well. There are going to be the inevitable bumps. How has your Albion education helped you get over the tough times?
That's a really challenging question. Because when I think about challenging times and obstacles, to me, there's not really any one that sticks out. It's just life. Life is full of obstacles, and it's not really the obstacles or challenges themselves that define us. It's how we respond to them and how we react. And it's all about perseverance and determination and finding alternative routes and being resourceful. And Albion definitely taught me those skills.
I would just add that I think Albion College is the perfect place for somebody to go to school if they're looking to go into the ministry. And I say that for a bunch of reasons. And the biggest one is that I took classes in all different kinds of fields. And as a pastor, you never know who's going to walk through the doors of your office. You never know who you're going to encounter for the first time. And people walk in and they introduce themselves as CPAs and auditors and psychologists. And I took all those classes here. And I might not know everything that they know, but I can ask the right questions. And so the education that I got here was absolutely paramount in terms of building a foundation for me to be able to have conversations with people from a variety of different fields. And I feel eternally blessed for the foundation that was built here and established here by great professors who challenged me to think critically about the world around me. And I'm thankful for that.
So if we were to talk about that, we might talk about it as a well-rounded education or an understanding of how different ideas in life are connected. Let's talk just a little bit about this aspect of a liberal arts education where you're learning much more than facts or really much more than equations and skills. Can you talk about one of the life traits or life preparations that came out of Albion where you say, you know, I didn't take a course in this, but whether it was co-curricular or on the athletic field, I learned to be, I learned X, and talk about that, how that's helped. And maybe a bit of where you think you picked that up.
Absolutely. I'm going to steal Danny's line. I have the mic, so I'm just going to keep going here. It's one of the craziest things that I did when I was at Albion College was I was on the whitewater canoeing and kayak team. And a lot of people think that is absolutely insane. I've told members of my church that that's something that I do, and when they see me in the pulpit on Sunday, they wonder, is it the right guy to be preaching messages of hope? But I loved the thrill of going out on rivers, and we were on class 3 and 4 and sometimes 5 rapids, and it's that feeling of not necessarily being in control and enjoying the adventure of life and having experiences that I never would have had I gone to another school. And I got to be, a captain of that team. We went to West Virginia and North Carolina and had some amazing experiences together on the river. And I think it's prepared me for heart-throbbing moments in life, exhilarating moments, the highs and the lows, the terrifying things that happen in our world. And I just... Where can you go to college and experience that in the state of Michigan? It's absolutely a fantastic place to go to school.
And one of those other items on the list that we didn't get to, of the top 6, was to be really immersed in co-curricular activities. And maybe immersed is what happens when you're whitewater rafting, right? Yeah.
Well, maybe not as challenging as whitewater rafting, but still challenging. We spoke earlier about the Pleiad, and when I was in school, it was a weekly paper. So Tuesday nights we would be in the office until 5 a.m. It was cool to go back to the office today, and now it's all online now, and they had some of our layouts out, and I posted a picture on Facebook. I was all excited. But those were deadlines. It was working with a group. I think, as you mentioned, you put it best that Albion is a sense of community, and knowing that the student body was going to read, see, talk about your work every Friday morning when the paper came out. It was pressure, but it was good pressure because it made you thrive. And it was something that you were proud of. And I think everyone's proud of being at Albion and doing their work that they did because of the community here, that people know what you do on every level, not just on the sports team or in the classroom, but in the extra things. And for me, it was Pleiad, among other things. So that was important.
We'll go with one more, and then,
Okay.
Then I'm going to ask a hard question, but you weren't planning on it.
All right, we need to keep going harder here, apparently. I would say, even, and this is maybe a little cliche, and I think everyone really loves this about Albion, is that it teaches you to ask in a lot of ways because the school is so small, the professors are so available, your students are so available next to you, kind of going off of Danny's point, and you're able to, if I need something, if I need a connection or something like that, you can ask for it quite easily. There's no, if you get told no here, it's not a big deal. And I think that's a really difficult skill to learn later, is that, if I need something, I need to ask for it in some way and to figure out who do I need to ask. And I think that was really enabled by, the open door policies of professors, the concentration of students, and even coaches too.
I think Carly promised that I wouldn't ask any questions that she hadn't briefed you on in advance, but I'm going to just because, it seems like the right thing to do. One of the things I'd love to do is have our first-year students come over to 501 East Michigan, where I get to live, and we talk about their experience at the college. And usually they've been here a couple weeks or a couple months, and I say, talk to me about one thing that's different about your Albion education than you're hearing from your high school friends who've gone off to college elsewhere, right? What they're talking about on Facebook. What's different about Albion, and why is it a good thing, right? So, not that we're better than every other college, but we're different, and how does the difference make us good? And the first thing they'll always come up with is our classes are smaller, because they're thinking of friends at University of Michigan or Michigan State or Grand Valley State, and they say, well, classes are smaller. And then I say, why is that good? Right? And then that's an interesting question for them, because if the class is just like every other class, it's a lecture class and it's a smaller group, it's not necessarily better. So they have to think about, why are small classes good? Does someone want to help out those first year students who really struggle with that question? Why are small classes good?
I just really like attention. So
That works.
I think that's yeah, you get attention. I think that's an amazing thing, and I think if you're anyone who knows me knows this. I will ask a question first thing. I will do whatever. I think that's why I'm a marketing officer. But the small classes really enable to get noticed. I mean, I had professors calling me if I wasn't showing up to class. And I mean, as annoying as that might have been at the time, like, that was pretty special. I don't think you would have any other place that you have that kind of accountability and commitment to your own education in any other place.
I think it was really neat, actually. When I was here, I got to dog sit for some of the professors, which speaks to, we had dinners at their houses. There were times that we were watching movies, for classes in the homes of professors. And I just can't imagine very many places where that kind of close attention takes place. The professors here care about students. They care about not only the performance in the classroom, but also holistically for their entire being. And professors remember your name. I got to see many of the people that I held dear when I was a student here, walking around campus today. They were able to call out to me by name. And it's been, a short period of time for me, a couple of years, but I think that's incredible. It's incredible that they retained that information and that they knew me. It's felt so special to be back.
I think along all of those same lines, the points that you brought up is the accountability. I never had a professor call me or email me because I didn't dare not go to class. If I was at a much larger university or large lecture hall, I'm sure there probably would have been those mornings where I said, do I really need to go? There's not an exam, whatever. But here, it wasn't just the accountability of they're going to notice that I'm not there, but it was also what would I miss? We had those discussions that you can't have in a giant 300-student lecture hall. And they would take the class in a totally different direction than what was listed on the syllabus. And if I missed out on that, how would I ever get it back? So I had to be in class.
Well, I'm going to share a joint story, I guess. Both my sisters went to Albion. They're here tonight, and I live with my sister now. We're both in grad school in Chicago, and I'm at Northwestern, and it's a bigger program, and the class discussions are a little off. And one day I came home to my sister, and I said, hey, are you ever in class and you feel like, am I changing the direction of a conversation, or am I making too bold of a point and then it sort of spins off into something else? She said, no, you just went to a liberal arts school. And so I think, and then it came true. I was in a group project, and we got to choose our groups, which never really happens when you're in a big class. And all of a sudden, I'm with the two other students, and all of us went to a small school. And I'm like, okay, these are the people who I want to work with. And I don't think it's just coincidence that all of us had a similar undergraduate background.
So I'm going to elaborate on these responses for a minute, and while I'm doing that, kind of giving my brief 5-minute wrap-up, we won't really be wrapping up, because what I'm going to let you do in that time is think about one professor or one staff member that you want to give a shout out to, and you can't do Professor Wilson again because he's already feeling too good, but you have to come with another. So as you leave, give out a shout out, and then we'll pass the word along if they're not here tonight. I actually liked your answer. I liked all of your answers, but I like where we ended up with this idea of what's the value of a small class. And to me, we have small classes because democracy requires them. Right? So you go into a class and you say, I'd like to listen to the professor lecture because she knows a lot more than anyone else in this room. But then other people start to talk and they say really dumb things. But then we listen for a while and we discover maybe it wasn't so dumb after all. And then we give our point, we debate it, and eventually sometimes we change our mind in those discussions. And people we thought were completely wrong, we decide they might be a little brighter than us, or sometimes we learn to articulate our position. We learn to relate to others. We learn a skill that I call sympathetic imagination. Right? At some point we may say, that person next to me has not caused me to change my mind, but I understand why they believe what they do, and if I led the life they had, I might believe it as well. And it seems to me that's a trait, or that's a characteristic that a democracy needs. If we never change our mind, if we can't discuss things with each other, why bother to have more than one election? Why bother to have elections at all? And so that's one of several reasons that I believe is absolutely crucial that the private residential liberal arts colleges that are distinctively American continue to thrive in this country. And that's why we need the support of a strong alumni board, a strong board of trustees, good folks, good young alumni out there succeeding, so that in this time where people wonder, is a liberal arts college really worth it? Is it providing anything? One of the things we can say is, we do lots of things, but one of the things we do as small classes is we prepare people to make democracy work. And that's exciting. And while we're at it, if we just had one other reason to think about, there's so many, but last night we had a really fine lecture, and the night before we had a really fine lecture. We're at that time of year where we have lots of the endowed lectureships we plan to do all year, but we have to squeeze them in at the end because we're running out of time. And they both had to do with biology and medicine. And one of our students in the final question last night said to the speaker, it seems to me that the last two, the presentation last night, the presentation tonight, are linked in an interesting way. And then he described how they were linked in a way that surprised the lecturer. Surprised me, but only a little bit. One of the traits that we come up with in liberal arts college is the ability to integrate knowledge, tie knowledge from one area to another. And first-year students have real struggles tying today's class to tomorrow's class. Then eventually they start doing one class, one semester to another, and then pretty soon they start finding ties between things that don't even seem to fit together. And if we're to solve society's tough problems, we're going to have some people who are really good at tying ideas from one area to another area. And we saw our students doing that last night. Now, I hope I've given you enough time with my thoughts about why in fact it's important that Albion College thrive, to get a chance to think of who would you like to give a shout out to?
I'm starting changing the question, but it was really cool to go to school with both my sisters, and have that family connection, and we were able to challenge each other with just in our schooling and in extracurricular activities. That's a bond that we'll never have.
That's a really interesting question. I was in Traverse City last week, and I was at a restaurant with a couple of our graduates, and the owner of the restaurant came up to me and said, "You folks are from Albion College." It was easy to know that alums are wearing Albion ties, and we said, "Yes." He said, "My daughter's a first-year student at Albion College," and we got to talking about it. He said, "And she has a twin sister who's at Michigan State." And in fact, I said, "Oh, I know, that's Grace," right? And I knew that because she came to my house, and when we were talking about the difference between colleges, she talked about the difference she and her twin sister were having. So we talked about that conversation. And then he said, and next year, they'll both be going to Albion.
My answer, I guess, since we've taken liberties to change the question a little bit, I I wouldn't be here without the chaplain of Albion College, Dan McEwen. So it's been a real honor to be back and to be with you again. He's spent many hours mentoring and talking with me about everything from church polity to personal spirituality. And so I'm thankful that Albion offers the full package, the spiritual life and the academic life. And I also would just share my favorite professor was actually in a class that I didn't have to take and wouldn't have taken if I didn't come to a liberal arts school, Jess Roberts. I took an African American literature class, and she turned my world upside down. She helped me think about race and the issues that face our world in new and meaningful ways. And as a pastor in Metro Detroit, it's critical that we're competent with regards to issues of race. And I entered ignorant and left educated, and I'm very thankful that she broke down my understandings of racial injustice and justice in this country so I could be more eloquent and thoughtful when I talk about those issues.
All right, well, I'm going to go with the question for a minute, only a minute. And I'm going to have to say, like, most of my college experience was very much shaped by Dr. Emmanuel Yewa. He's here tonight, and he, from showing up as a sophomore French student who didn't want to go to France and wanted to go somewhere else, to working in Africa, mostly full-time in some ways, is pretty transformative. So, Schoolcraft, Michigan, if any of you know where that is, it's not very African-related in any way. So I would say absolutely that experience and that kind of ability to, again, just have those talks. My boyfriend would think they were just talking about polygamy. I don't think that's a conversation you really have in everyday life in Michigan. And as well as there's a biology professor, so along the same lines of someone who I never would have interacted with, but through the Honors Institute, he's left Albion, but for bigger and better things at actually KBCC College running it is Dr. Dean McCurdy, so many of you might know him. So both awesome people.
Well, since I can't say Dr. Wilson, I would have to say Dr. Ruth Schmitter. She is probably the only person at all of Albion College that I'm still intimidated by. But I learned to face my fear and ask her to be a member of my committee for my honors thesis. And I think the thing that stands out the most to me is in her Neuroscience 2 class, she gave us these journal articles to read, and they were from high-profile, peer-reviewed journals, written in all this crazy jargon that I don't even understand, and we had to present it to the class. After I went on to UCLA, I realized what she was doing was having a journal club, and that's what we do at graduate school, and what scholars do is they read the current literature and they stay abreast of that. She gave me the hardest stinking article. I didn't understand anything in there. And we had to work together as partners, and my partner didn't want to come to class, and it was very challenging. But I worked through it night and day, trying to figure out what those terms meant and how this thing could possibly work. Any of you that are up on neuroscience techniques or the biomedical field might know this little thing called optogenetics. She had me read the very first paper about this groundbreaking technique. Of course, there were no other sources for it because it was the first paper on it. In my postdoc position, I have an opportunity to actually use optogenetics. And I look back to that first paper that I read in Dr. Schmitter's class and how scared I was that I was going to present this to the class and everybody was going to know I didn't know what I was talking about. And I realized none of them knew whether I knew what I was talking about anyway. But Dr. Schmitter knew, and that's the scary part.
Thank you so much for a fine conversation.
Don't you love it how all four of those young folks changed the question from the president of Albion College? If that's not liberal arts in action, I don't know what is.